We are streaming live on Facebook, and we will post our interview tomorrow to YouTube and onto the Book Club Babble site by next week. So if you missed it, you can catch it later. So Rob, welcome. Good to see you.
Hi, Tab. Good to see you again.
So Rob and I were on a panel this summer at the Writer's Digest conference, and we chatted a lot about the publishing industry and writing and our books, and it was so much fun that I thought I got to have him on the show. So instead of doing a real review of his books, I profiled him as an author and sort of talked a little bit about all of his work in our written interview that went up on the site yesterday. And tonight, I'm going to give him a chance to talk about a whole bunch of good, interesting things and sort of give our readers an insight into the writer's mind and process, and a little bit about publishing and a little bit about your actual books that were extremely funny and extremely smart and very different from what I've ever featured here before, and different from many of the things that I usually read. So it was refreshing and fun. So Rob, welcome. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, because I know you own an ad agency, an award-winning ad agency. You've been working with your brother on that, and you've been also writing for a very long time. So can you talk a little bit about yourself and when writing became a profession alongside your other profession?
Okay, great. Well, I've always been, I was one of the kids that was always in love with movies, and I had my own little Super 8 camera and made silly movies even as a young teenager. And I kept kind of going with the creative, but when I got to college age, figured, get responsible, and went to college for marketing and continued that and wound up at an ad agency. And then when my brother formed his own ad agency, I joined him as a copywriter and a designer. So we've been doing that for like 22 years now. And all that time I was writing copy, commercial copy. And, kind of that movie thing kept kind of sticking in my mind. So maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, I started taking screenwriting classes. And I kind of loved the form. I loved like learning about storytelling, and it turned into, either the choice of trying to pitch screenplays out in Hollywood, or maybe trying books and trying to sell them, like self-publishing, like yourself. And I kind of chose that route. And from the first book, I was hooked. I loved it. So I've been writing narrative fiction and humor for about 6 years now.
Yes, and your humor is is really funny. So let's talk a little bit about your book. So Unleash the Sloth.
I just happen to have one right here.
You have a copy. and talk a little bit about that, because that's not actually a novel, and that's really the first thing you tried writing, right? And kind of tested the whole indie publishing market.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. When I thought about self-publishing, this idea had already been percolating. Because I had already been known as the guy that would look for kind of shortcuts, like ways to do less and still get things done. Right. And I had kind of an ongoing list of how to do less. And it was just a matter of time before the list started to steamroll into an actual book length. It's not a big book. It's a thin book, right? And I decided to use that as my first experiment. It's basically the theme of using the metaphor of the sloth to find ways to do less and still get things done.
And it's pretty darn funny. It's like one of those books you can just sort of open and read a page and be like, that's, yep.
The highest compliment I've gotten is that it's an excellent bathroom reader.
I was going to say that. I almost wrote that in the post, and I was like, I don't know. Will that be
No.
I said I leave it on my coffee table. I really don't have it in my coffee table. It's in the bathroom. And it's like that book you just pick up and you're like, I need a chuckle.
Yeah, just a quick chuckle.
Yes, it's really funny. All right, and so then you ventured into full-length novels, and you did Where the Hell is Tesla? Is that the first one?
Correct. Oh, I just happen to have a copy of that here.
Have that as well, which I did read in its entirety, cover to cover.
Wow, dude, thank you very much, Tabitha, for that, by the way.
Yeah, it was good. I laughed out loud, and it was, so actually, before I comment on it, why don't you just give your little elevator pitch?
Elevator pitch on Where the Hell is Tesla?
Yes.
Where the Hell is Tesla is a science fiction comedy. It's about it's kind of a slacker security guard named Chip, who through various mishaps stumbles across the lost journal of Nikola Tesla, which leads him to the New Yorker hotel, which leads him to an interdimensional portal. And he talks his best friend on his best friend's 30th birthday to to check this thing out, and they get stuck in it and they can't find their way out.
And it's so funny.
And they wind up having to try to find Tesla and, of course, save the entire multiverse. If they can. I'm not going to give it away.
Right. But there's a book too. So
there's a book too, and if you haven't guessed already, I have it right here.
You have it right here. Well, anyway, the other thing though that was, aside from it being really funny, and I had moments where I was just like snorting and reading at the same time, is that it was really it was smart. I mean, you know, like your two little, what are those two little creatures called again? I forget.
Bobo?
The Bobo that split and became two Bobos. And
sure.
They were quantumly entangled.
Yes.
Like, hello.
Yes.
You know, and I was just like, oh, this is really very brilliant, you know, and so there's really this smart humor behind it, and you can pick up on a lot of stuff like that. And the other thing I really liked about it was that there are real themes in there. You know, I mean, Chip is kind of growing up in a way as a character as he goes through this, and he has some moments where, you know, you say some stuff and it's really good stuff, you know, like that his self-awareness kind of coming online. And I liked that, you know, so it was not just humorous and funny and absurd. It actually had some real meat to it as well. And
agreed.
I appreciate that. So then the blue stuff, Don't Touch the Blue Stuff is the sequel. Now, you weren't going to write a sequel though, right?
Correct. I was going to write a sequel. Where the Hell is Tesla was meant to be a standalone, like happy ending. Sorry, spoiler alert. Happy ending.
It is a comedy. You kind of really can't kill everyone at the end in a comedy. That would be bad form, I think.
It was meant to be a standalone. But, you know, in the back of my mind, there was always this, like, they're going into a multiverse with infinite possibilities. So you're like, why not? Maybe. Who knows? In the back, way back. And only after I started getting feedback, like, when's the sequel coming? Like, I sold enough copies where I was like, okay, this isn't a complete disaster. This is selling.
Right.
And then I got enough feedback to write the sequel. And I said, you know what? You know, I didn't want to be a sequel guy, but Chip was whispering in my ear, like, he just doesn't shut up. So, and he literally doesn't shut up. So.
No, he doesn't. That's his whole, like, he just like talks.
That's his shtick.
All right. And The Wrong Unit? I have not read that one. I have to be honest. That's not one I
Wait, you didn't read this one. You didn't read the Don't Touch the Blue Stuff too, did you? Oh my God.
I'll be honest. I haven't finished it yet, but yes.
Okay.
I'm
spoiler alert. It's also a happy ending.
It also has a happy ending, but I know, you know, I'm
The Wrong Unit, which
I read the summary of that, and that's pretty funny too.
I have here as well. The Wrong Unit is a little less of a comedy. It was meant to be a comedy because the setup is a humor setup where the world is ruled by artificial intelligence, and the humans, in order to free themselves from the control of the artificial intelligence, send out a unit to save the human race, but they send out the wrong unit, all right? So it's supposed to be a comedy, but what wound up happening is, as I was writing it, it really became more of a, and I hate to say the word, like a tender story of the robot becoming more human. And I'm going to give away a little bit. They sent him out with a human infant who was going to save them. And he becomes sort of the father to this human infant. And it becomes this kind of sweet tale with a lot of hijinks and a lot of laughs, but a little bit more serious.
Gotcha.
And this one was really more, I read a book when I was young called This Perfect Day, written by the guy, Ira Levin, who wrote Rosemary's Baby.
Oh.
And the Stepford Wives. And it was one of my first science fiction books I ever read. And so this is kind of an homage to that.
Gotcha.
Very nice. Nice to do.
I was going to ask you this later, but it leads kind of right into it. Do you ever, and I don't mean the word serious, but, you know, do you ever see taking humor out of your writing and trying to go straight up hardcore sci-fi or whatever, you know, narrative?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so at this point. Like, you know, you've seen people do it like Woody Allen, right? Like Woody Allen goes from like slapstick humor to like a little more sophisticated humor. And then he's got stuff that has no humor in it, or you have to kind of search for it. Right now I'm too immature.
And so you're really funny. So, you know, you do what you're good at.
Gonna stay in it. I'm writing one.
There's like a thing going on in your head that you know is that, because I'm, you know, writing in the sci-fi fantasy and a little bit in the horror genre right now, but I have a historical.
Oh, you're doing horror?
I'm writing a short story, a horror short story, and I finished.
Can I just tell you, by the way, your 2-sentence horror intro thing
Oh, thanks.
was awesome.
Thank you. I apparently have a little taste for the horror thing. I did sell a ghost story. I've never written. That was my very first, and I liked it so much doing it that I had a dream.
Wow.
The dream was a nightmare, actually. I woke up and I said, wait. This is so awful. I have to write it down. So
And it's turning into a whole book?
It's turning into a short. It potentially could be a whole book, but but I want to write out a genre. I want to write a historical fiction, World War II story. And I have the theme in my head, but I feel like I'm too much of a baby writer to do it still. And it's out of my, it's out of my comfort zone as a writer. So I kind of understand but also you're really good at this though. So
yeah.
It's kind of hard to like venture off from what you love and what you're good at.
Well, I like the horror. I could read a book of 2-sentence horror stories by you.
Okay. I'll work on it. I'll get to work on it. We'll put it with the Sloth next to the Sloth only. It'd be like the anti-Sloth book. I don't know.
I think the most serious I could ever get, like I sort of have I just love Kurt Vonnegut. Mm-hmm. And, he has this, like Slaughterhouse-Five was very serious, but it was also like sort of absurd. Right. And funny and hilarious at moments. So that would be maybe like a far off goal. But I mean, we're talking about Kurt Vonnegut. I don't know if I'll ever get there.
I know. Well,
but that would be
fire, right?
Right. Exactly.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about your journey of publishing, because I think that's interesting. And I think readers maybe don't know the different pathways to get there and what it takes to put a book into production. And so when you've chosen the indie route, as we both have, I have a few things, but I mostly, and you two are we'll talk about that later. But, there's an appeal to this, to people like our personality types. And can you just talk a little bit about the path and why you chose to do it and what the appeal was?
Sure. Yeah. So when I did the first book, Unleash the Sloth, the general thing is, I'm going to be a writer and you're going to try to get an agent, or you're going to try to get a publisher interested or something like that. And it only took like maybe 5 or 6 rejections for like my instincts to kick in. And my instincts are very DIY. Like I'm a very do-it-yourself kind of guy. Right. And like, I know that the tools are out there that have totally leveled the playing field, at least from a production and distribution standpoint. Right. So you can produce your own book. It's really not hard. And you can distribute your own book on Amazon or whatever. Right. Pretty straightforward. And then, so that's the route I decided to go. And I think for almost any author, it's fairly straightforward. And then the big giant hump though is marketing yourself. Right. I think having the marketing background helps me. Sure. But I think probably for a lot of self-published authors, that's like the huge stumbling block. Like I self-published my book and I only sold 10 copies. I don't know why, and it kind of becomes obvious why you need some building blocks of marketing to get the books out there.
Right.
You do things like go to Writers Digest conference. Right.
And that's what I realized.
And then
we met each other.
And I'm on this thing.
Our panel, we didn't shut up. Like that was the thing. I got on that. I was on a sci-fi fantasy panel earlier, in the weekend, and it was kind of like we waited for the person to ask us the question. We took our turns answering, and then if somebody asked a question, we kind of looked around to see who was going to answer. Our panel were like, we all talking all over each other. We've got so much to say. People were asking questions. The whole room there's a personality type that can do this way.
And then Ben just broke the whole panel open.
I know.
Wide open.
He totally did.
Dude, he was awesome.
He totally did. But and the other piece though is the quality assurance piece. That's what I find some indies don't do quite as well. But then again, they won't sell either.
Correct. Yeah, I guess for me that's almost like it almost goes without saying. Like you really need proofreading, editing. You need to have a cover that passes that sort of bar at least. And I don't want to sound highfalutin or anything like that, but you need to have a cover that doesn't scream like I designed this myself.
Exactly. I drew it on, my sketch pad, my sketch.
Right.
Stand it in. So now you've got to deal with Audible. So
Yeah,
you're venturing into the I am going to be paid to do this thing.
isn't that crazy? So wait, you're there though, right? In some.
No, I have sold shorts. I've sold short
Oh,
fiction.
okay,
I've
that's right.
contracted to write some that I've not known what I was going to write, and got the, signed the contract and said, uh-oh, and there's a deadline. It turns out I liked working like that, but I wasn't sure. So how do you feel about,
Actually,
obviously it's great. It's a mark of you done.
it's definitely it's definitely a feather in my cap. They contacted me out of nowhere. I didn't even pitch them. They had seen the sales and the reviews of the first couple of novels, and reached out to me and contracted me just based on like a 2-sentence summary of the book. So that's, like you said, that's like pat on the back, feather in the cap.
Right.
But then like what you just said about like now it's a deadline,
Exactly.
and now I have a client.
Exactly.
So I'm in, like, I'm 22,000 words into it right now, and like up until now I've been going on the like just the momentum of like oh yeah, and now all of a sudden it's kicking in like oh shit.
I actually have to finish it.
I have to finish this thing.
Exactly.
And somebody's going to be reviewing and editing this,
Right. And
but it's very exciting, and like I'm used to, from the ad agency, I'm used to having deadlines, so I'm familiar with like that feeling. Right. So that's not a problem at all. I'm just getting used to like, is it the same thing when you're writing a 80,000 word book? Like having
right as design, yeah. It's exciting.
Like when you're doing a project, most of my ad projects are 3 weeks and you're done.
Yeah, this is a long.
This is like 8 months long. So yeah.
Right. So give us your 2-sentence pitch that you sold to Audible.
2-sentence pitch is,
or whatever. You can make it more than 2 sentences. Make it as many as you want.
Mars is like very hot right now, right? With Elon Musk and everybody talking about a potential Mars mission, whatever. So I said to myself, what if there was a reality show where they sort of auctioned off a spot on the crew to go to Mars, and this reality show was filled with like the absolute worst possible people that you would want on a crew for Mars. And the protagonist, although she's sympathetic and you like her, is probably not the best person to go to Mars. And she winds up winning the reality contest and getting on the crew to Mars. And various terrible, terrible things happen. But it's a sci-fi comedy.
I'm looking forward to it.
Disasters are probably averted, but I don't know yet.
No, right. Well, you probably
I think everybody might die at the end.
That's pretty funny. All right, so you started off writing screenplays.
Yes.
And you've written some short stories. So what's the can you talk a little bit about the difference between crafting a screenplay? Actually, I just had a conversation the other night with a writer who had written a screenplay, and he called me to say, I want to write a novel. Do you think I should write a novel? And I was like, well, if you feel inspired to write a novel, yes, you should write a novel, but sure. They're very different forms. So can you talk a little bit about whatever adjustments you had to make or what your learning curve was for the long form versus
sure. First, I'll tell you the great thing about learning screenplays versus taking like a narrative fiction writing course. Screenplays have to are written in the first person. I'm sorry, not in the first person. They're written in the present tense, and there's not dialogue attribution, right? So you don't have he said, she said.
Right.
So she said this, he said this. So when you're writing a screenplay, it's Ted walks across well, you don't say walk, right? There's 60 other words you're supposed to use instead of walk. Ted strolls across the room to Monica and gives her a kiss on the cheek. So that's all in the present tense, and it's very like short, snappy description, and the dialogue is just there because you've just got a name on the screenplay form. You have the name and then the dialogue. So you don't have dialogue attribution. So it makes for me a more streamlined novel approach as well. It's a little tighter.
Yep.
And I like the present tense. For my first 3 novels, it's been present tense. My short stories, a lot of them are in past tense, and the new novel is in the past tense, like sort of near past tense. So that's what I like about it. The difference is, and I had to get used to this, is the ability to flesh out like sort of a feeling or a scene. Like you don't have that in a screenplay. You're in the scene.
Right.
But in a novel, I mean, you can take a page to talk about how someone's feeling or about like a conflict that on the screen might take a few seconds.
Right. It's a visual.
So the length, the first novel. I don't know if it was like this for you, Tabitha, but like 50,000 words was mountain I never knew I could climb.
Yep. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I got to 95 in my first manuscript, and I had to cut it back to like 82.
You
But
wrote 95,000?
did. I know. And then I thought, and then you finish that and you start to write the second one. You're like, oh, I don't think I can do it again. I don't know. What if I was a one-hit wonder, and I don't have another story in me. And then you finish the second one, and I'm still.
How long is the second one?
It's about 82. It's almost exactly the same length.
Okay. You wrote it like the Odyssey, where it's the exact same number of words?
Didn't mean to, but it's an iambic pentameter. Wait, that's Shakespeare now.
Yeah, exactly. Every sentence is the same number length.
Yeah. So yeah, it turned out to be.
I can read it backwards to Pink Floyd?
You can, yes, you can play your music or whatever. Exactly. All right. So I asked you on the written interview, if you could pick a screenplay to, bring to life. So I wasn't going to ask you that, but you write a lot of short stories too. So, and you have them on a podcast. And
yeah, actually, I don't even think I mentioned that in the thing. How did you know about the podcast? Did I have that in the?
Did my research.
Okay. Yes.
And we've actually spoken in person in the past, so
yes,
I did know something. I have a good memory. No, but anyway, so out of your short stories, which one's your favorite? And tell us a little bit about its.
Okay. I'm glad you asked that. So you just mentioned you woke up with a horror story in your mind. It was a nightmare. Yep. So I woke up with a semi-nightmarish story. This is before the election, before the latest election, right? So, and everybody, it depends, regardless of what side of it you're on or whatever. I think there was anxiety about the election this year.
For sure.
So I woke up one morning with this story, and it was like in my head, the whole entire story. So it's on the podcast. It's called November 8th. And it's the story of a young boy who moves into a new neighborhood and sort of befriends this bully that's in the neighborhood too. But and bully labels him a little too quickly. It's a lot more complicated than that. And it's this really cool little story. I don't even know if you could call it sci-fi. It's just sort of speculative fiction. Mm-hmm. And it's my favorite so far. Because to me, it just tapped into this subconscious that everybody was having at the time. And there's not really a good guy or a bad guy. There's just sort of kind of conflict and questions.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I believe, anyway, in general. No good guys or bad guys.
Just conflict and questions.
Conflict and questions. and resolution, like in relationships.
Right. So how many short stories
to get too philosophical.
How many shorts have you written?
The shorts on the podcast, I think there's 8 to 10. I forget exactly how many there are on there. And then in the wings, I've got 35. Not completely written, but various stages of written.
Aren't they so satisfying to write?
Oh, short stories are so, because you get in and out.
You get in and out. It's not like a year's commitment. And yet you still have the satisfaction of a story arc and a complete, idea that you've been able to express. I get kind of hooked on them, and I have to bring myself back. And
yeah. Wait, so what do you find yourself concentrating more on, shorts? Or now are you I'm
in the middle of drafting book 3, so I'm putting the other things aside, but they they kind of tweet at the sides, and
dude, submit, give me a story for the podcast. I'll put it on the podcast.
All right,
I'll narrate it, because by the way, the podcast, in case anybody's listening, is audio, so they're audio short stories. Awesome. So I'll narrate it for you. I'll
do it.
You got to give me a male protagonist, though. Okay.
Do you want horror or sci-fi?
Oh, horror would be good.
Okay. I'll finish that horror one for you then.
So what I've been doing is, while I'm writing the novels, I haven't, the past couple of months I fell off of it, but I try once a month to write a short story that's about 2,000 words. And it does that thing. It satisfies that itch that you were talking about.
See, that's a good way of looking at it. It's
like
a break.
I just one short story. Okay. And it's like a little, I think of it like a little sketch pad.
I feel less guilty now about me. So good. You've given me permission to continue on with my.
That's okay. Let's sign off now.
I got to get to work now.
Leave it on a high note.
All right. So now I find that our readers are very often interested in writer's process. And Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Oh God, really? That I didn't know about you. So yeah. And when do you write? What's your do you go by word count per day?
Wait, can we talk about the plotter pantser thing for a second?
Yes.
So are you the other way? Are you a plotter?
I am.
Wow.
I'm a loose outliner, I will say, but this third book, I have very, very little
Are you like
idea of where I'm going.
J.K. Rowling spreadsheet woman on this one?
I'm not that bad. I mean, I definitely am a loose outliner. And so I like to know where I'm going. I like to know the major plot points that are happening. I like to know where I'm going to end up. And in between, I start to fill it in, and this last one, I have no idea where I'm going.
Oh, that's good. That's
terrified. No, I'm stressed every single day. So please make me feel better about that. And tell me how
yeah, no, the terror is good. Terror is good. For this book, for Tesla, I knew
terror is good.
I knew just the first email. It's in the form of emails.
Yeah.
I knew the first email and I knew the end, and that was it. And it was terrifying. Well, except for the first novel, it wasn't really terrifying because like nobody knew who I was, and it didn't matter.
You don't have anything to live up to.
It's a little bit more terrifying now.
Yeah,
and it's funny you say
contracts make it terrifying. No.
Yeah, with the one for Audible, I find myself. I wrote like 5 pages of outlines like 2 days ago because I was finding myself getting 20,000 words into the story and going, I think I need a better idea of where this is going.
Right? So you're a pantser. Good.
In general, I enjoy the pantsing thing. I heard somebody one time say, like, described it just right.
That makes me have to drink. Just saying.
Described it just right for me. And it was like, when you're a pantser, you're like, the story is revealing itself as if you're reading it. And I kind of like that. Like, okay. Oh, it's new to you too. So you have that sort of anticipation and that discovery of it while you're writing it. Okay. So that's at least my excuse for not outlining.
I'm going to go with that.
That's my excuse for not outlining.
Every morning I'm going to wake up and say, I'm going to discover today. That's going to be exciting. Instead of, Jesus, what am I going to do? I just got to get out this many words and it's okay. So
this one is becoming more outlined.
Okay.
Because there's an evil corporation involved in this one, and I haven't done evil corporation yet, so I'm a little bit like, okay, I kind of got to get this right. So.
The evil corporation, yeah. I like that. That's good. All right, so you go by word count, or do you just write until you feel like you're done?
The process. I said this in my little thing for you. I have a full-time job.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of squeezing it in and stuff, but.
There's a fly buzzing around me. Sorry.
You're telling me to stop? Are we ending this?
It's a fruit fly.
On good writing days, you wake up early, meditate a little bit, stretch a little bit, journal just for a little bit. And then there's this, I read this book, 2K to 10K. You ever hear of it?
Nope.
Okay, 2K to 10K. It's like 2,000 to get from 2,000 words a day to 10,000 words a day, which I've never done, by the way.
Oh, me either.
I can't believe people do 10,000 words a day. But I read that book. It's great. So, but the one thing I loved about that book was like, take 10 minutes and write what you're going to write for the day. So write out like, okay, this next scene is going to be about this conflict between these two characters and one of them is going to kill the other or whatever. So I try to do that. And then when I do that, and then I have 3 martinis, then I'm like really good for
right?
No, I do that. And then I can hit like 2,000 on a super day. I'll do 3,000. That's like just about the top end of what I'll do. And then, as I said in the little interview thing, on a bad day, I'll wake up late, hit my head against the desk, type 600 words, and throw them out the next day because they were awful.
The writer's life. And editing.
Target is 2,000 a day when you're just writing first draft.
Yep.
Target is 2,000 a day. I can hit it. I know I can hit it. And when I do hit it, it feels good and it reinforces the next day. Right. But I also find that I've read people say this, if I have 3 2,000 word days in a row, I find the 4th day, I'm just not, I need to refill.
Mm-hmm. Do you like to go to bed or leave your work knowing a little bit about what's coming the next day so you're not coming in cold? I know that's a trick that sometimes
yeah, I haven't thought about it. I think generally it's like you're walking down the street, like you kind of know what houses are coming up and you're going to pass them the next day. I think I generally know that. And something I really like though is when I'm in the groove, I'll go to bed sort of saying to myself, okay, I kind of want to wake up with something.
Right.
And I will, man. Those are the best, by the way. Like your horror story.
Yeah, it's crazy. I woke up and I was
like,
that was awful. And I'm like, wait a minute. I can repurpose that.
The ones, the best writing days sometimes are where you wake up and you're like, oh, I got it. That little half sleep thing comes to you. So.
Yep. And just last question about, because our time is almost up. It is up. But editing, is it terrifying to you, or do you find that process to be sort of soothing and just an improvement on the?
I think I'm still a work in process as editing goes, and so I can't answer. It's both. It's been great and it's been terrifying. This book, the wrong unit. My editor was my brother on that one. I have an older brother who was an editor, and there were more red marks than black marks when he got done with it.
Yeah.
So that was
like getting that paper back, and it's got an F on it, or it's got a D.
An F on it.
You're like, oh no.
I think he only wrote half an F. That's how bad. So that was awful. But the sequel that I just wrote for Tesla, it was actually. I felt good about editing it because every time I went into it, it got better.
Right.
And I think that's the first time I would say, like, I don't love doing multiple drafts. It happens, but this time I actually liked every time I went into a draft, it got a little better, and I liked it a lot. So maybe I'm maturing. Who knows?
But just each book is different. It's a different experience, maybe.
What about you? Wait, I want to ask you the same question.
Editing?
Yeah.
I have a love-hate. So when I just wrote a blog post for Writer's Digest about this too. And it was on like editing and the whole soup to nuts kind of thing. And I would say for me, when I finished with the book, I'm so relieved that it's out and I did it. And I am satisfied with the work. I know it could be better. I know there's lots of things, but I got my stories out. So I feel really excited and happy about that. Then I send it off and I know it's going to come back in shambles, like I just know. and even though I know it, it's still a traumatizing experience for me to get. And I love my editor. When I tell you, I speak her name everywhere I go. I praise her. She's phenomenal. She likes my writing, genuinely. She gets what I'm trying to do, but she's brutal, which she needs to be because she wants it to be
That's good. A good editor.
It's a good editor. And so I get it. And last time I got it, I was in California visiting my sister and we were on a vineyard. So I got shit-faced drunk. I read it and they were like, don't read the document. I was like, I have to read the document right now. And then I did. I drank it. I put it away and I let it sit. And I said, you know what? All the stuff that she's saying to me, I really already knew. And now I just have to figure out how to, and then that creative spark kicks in again to make the changes and to do it again. And then after that, that's the painful one. After that, you're just tweaking for me.
Yeah.
Once that developmental edit is really done and all the parts are correct, but it's a traumatizing experience and then it's a satisfying one. So like, I know, at least I now know that the satisfying is coming. Not just traumatized forever. So
I've read like one or two articles about people who love like the editing part, and I don't buy it yet.
Yeah. It's love-hate. I think it'll always be that, but anyway, well, it was a pleasure. And for our viewers out there, go buy Rob's books. You'll laugh and you'll appreciate the humor and the intelligence behind them all. And you can put Sloth in your bathroom and it's okay. He doesn't mind. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.